Let's talk about it.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Thicc Radio, the gaming podcast where we talk about gaming and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim. Let's get into it.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, doing good. It's a bit later in the evening and I haven't had dinner just yet, but that's A-okay because once we're done here, Mama's having paschetti. Ooh.
Just gonna have a good old spaghetti pig out.
Absolutely. Funny that. Did you ever watch Round the Twist?
I have not actually. I did not actually get to watch it because I know it was not broadcasting in the US. But I do know the episode you're talking about because I've seen it like since on YouTube.
Yep, and all the gainers love to play that thing with the press forward because for those of you listening at home who don't know, in Australia, where I'm from, it was a very popular kids' TV show called Round the Twist. And actually, I have to stop myself from singing the theme song because it's just so good. Like at a nightclub in Australia, if you just start off with "Have you ever?" like everyone will just get into the theme song. It was so good. Anyways, it was a show about kids and all these random things that would happen. And in one of them, there was like the big spaghetti pig out or something like that. It was a fundraiser for something. And one of the weird things that happens is the kids discover this remote where they can rewind or fast forward to like speed up time or make it go back. And in the plot, the bad kids get a hold of this remote and figure out what it can do. And they're waiting until the big bully, because of course they're bullies, like who's eating in the spaghetti pig out, like he's in the middle of eating, and they press the fast forward and there's the scene where all the spaghetti is just flying into his mouth and everyone's like shocked at what's going on. And you see the inflation moment of him swelling up and buttons popping off his shirt. And I can't remember if it like hits anyone in the face and if they like fall over or anything, but like, you know, it's a very dramatic moment. Very, very dramatic moment. So yeah, look, that's going to be me after this recording. Getting into the spaghetti.
Was that the same TV show where the kid was getting bullied by the guy who was stealing like his lunch money or something? And he said, the kid was like, "That's mine." And the bully was like, "If I had £1 for every time someone said that's mine." And then I don't know, was this the same show? Like, was there an episode where every time he said "that's mine," the bully would start like getting fatter because
no, but I've heard of
he misunderstood. It's not a pound is in money, but it is in like a pound on his body. I thought it was from the same TV show.
A different TV show. It happened here in the UK, but I hadn't seen it. I only know of it and this particular reference because someone on Grommr who was from the UK mentioned this episode and they were like, who else has seen this? And so no, not the same show, but a similar concept where the power that is had is abused and the result is that the person becomes quite porcine or porcine in response.
There's a word you don't get to use very often anymore. We should bring that back.
I feel like we need to have an episode on like language. Like there's another word I heard recently. It was like Zagfreet or something of that nature.
I'm not familiar with that word.
Zagfed or something with a Z in it. And it has a similar tone to zigzag, but it means someone who's quite large. So what else did they say? Rubenesque, rotund.
Portly.
I like portly. Portly kind of makes me think of like a British gentleman, who's had one too many beers at the bar. He's having one too many full English breakfasts and he's wearing tweed and the coat buttons just won't do up properly. And
before we get into the actual like meat of the episode, I was just curious, are there any like gainer related words or fat related words that like when you hear them it actually turns you on?
Portly does that a little bit for me, but again I think it's the whole like it's the fantasy moment. Like in my mind everything is related to the fantasy. So if you were to describe me as like a fucking fat ass, in my mind the image that is created is like the me as a big guy stuffed into the booth at McDonald's with far too much food in front of me, and it's some like young kid saying something he shouldn't. And I'm trying to be the guy who goes, "You get back here, kid." But, I've eaten too much and I'm wedged in the booth and I just can't get out. And, I become a laughing stock. It's that moment. Portly, again, British gentleman. I don't know. There's no other words that particularly trigger, I think, a specific idea. What about for you?
Actually, the word that turns me on the most is blubber.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why, but whenever I hear a gainer use that in reference to himself, or or to his belly, or that in general, it just turns me on. I don't know why. And the other example, I mean, it's just the word belly, but it's in a certain accent. So I was speaking to someone who was German, and every time he said the word belly in his accent, it just really turned me on for some reason.
Mm.
And it wasn't like a deep, gruff kind of, voice. It was very much an erudite, sort of scholarly kind of voice. And I was like, oh, I could listen to you say the word belly all day long. It was in a moment. It was like, oh, just keep saying the word belly.
I had a night in Amsterdam where basically this place was open 24/7. So the way we paid our €16 for the ticket to get in. Put our stuff in the lockers, put, your little towel on with your little keychain, you're sort of waddling about, looking at boys going, just every now and again. So I was like laying in one of these rooms, just like fingering myself a bit. And I looked up and like, because the door was open, and the biggest human being I have ever seen in my life was standing in the doorway. And in the deepest voice imaginable, he just went, woof. And I was like, oh, wow. And like my whole kind of twitched. And I was like, okay, this is going to be good.
If you had ovaries, they would have been a popping. It'd have been like pew pew pew.
Yeah, just shooting out fertilized eggs everywhere, just like give it to me. Truly, yeah, turn my eggs into a hollandaise, please. Please. But no, we then proceeded to spend the next couple of hours having a good old time. And do you know what? Thankfully, the spa was like 2 doors down because my neck hurt something real bad. I also realized at one point I was just laying on like one side of the room, but the way he was fucking me, I kept sliding across the mat and was eventually like bumping up against the bar wall.
Now that was a good night.
That was a fantastic night. Oh my gosh. I need to go back if I'm ever in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam's such a beautiful city. Like they had a waterfall feature and they had like a smoker's room. And they had like burgers and steak on the cafeteria menu.
Oh shit.
Like, you go to these places and it's like, what shall I have from the menu? What sort of amuse-bouche is available today? A fun-size Mars bar, perhaps?
Oh god, yeah. The bathhouse in Cleveland was not known for having like food available, and even when it wasn't stuff you wanted to eat.
Just bags of cheap chips, like memories. But you mentioned another word to me previously that does it for you.
Oh, blubber. Yes.
Blubber.
Blubber. I don't know why. It just turns me on to hear a guy talk about himself that way or refer to his belly as being blubbery. It's just, yeah, it just turns me on. I don't know why.
So that's kind of interesting, talking about the we don't knows of our gaining sexuality, because what we're actually talking about today, people, is the formation of the gaining experience. So, obviously Tim and I were similar ages, not the same age. So our references, they have some crossover, but they're not the same. But, I think what a lot of people can kind of agree on, because we all sort of talk about this, don't we? We all sort of talk about like, when did you first know? What kind of gave you the awakening of liking what you like? And I think a lot of people refer back to like movies they watched as kids. They refer back to cartoons. They refer back to like, just TV shows where they've encountered characters who were fat, and somehow it labored on the moment that they were fat. And that just put a moment of fascination in their minds that at whatever age they were, they looked at it and went, I like this, and I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it definitely goes all the way back to childhood. I want to say the grammar school years, because there was a lot of like obesity in 90s cartoons that I grew up with, because it was usually like a funny plot point in some of these shows. And, I always remember paying attention to that. But, more than that was being like having crushes on the chubby boys that were in my classroom.
Yeah.
And not in a sexual way, obviously, because puberty hadn't hit. But I always knew that I was fascinated by them for some reason. I wanted to be around them, and I always wanted to play with their fat. It was just something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be able to like be around them and like just touch their belly or jiggle it, or something like that. And then puberty hit and all the gears started switching on. And suddenly, looking at the chubby boys in the classroom were, sexually exciting me. Fantasies started to happen, discovering masturbation, and just fantasizing about what it would be like if I actually got to go further with it, not just touch their belly, but, in depth play with it, get my face in it, really, get it. Because I love that. I love bellies in my face. That's so hot to me. So, those fantasies started coming along. And then discovering the internet and the glorious golden age of gaining websites, that just sort of threw the doors open for me.
I can almost think when you sort of refer to this like golden age of gaining, I can almost taste it. That sensation of when you're really thirsty and you've got this like perfect can of soda, this soft drink, and you just hear that like sound as it like comes up, and you just get that moment of this is going to taste so good. Like just talking about the golden years of gaining, like that's what comes to mind for me, this sensation of
and that's what it was like. Yeah, I mean, it was just, there was endless amounts of stuff. I mean, and I say endless, there really wasn't that much, to be completely honest. There were maybe a handful of dedicated websites, but there were a lot of rabbit holes to go down in those early years. There was a lot of places, like if you went in a certain direction, you looked in the right places, you followed a certain thread, you could find all kinds of stuff. It was like a plethora, a cornucopia that never ended, and then it all came crashing down at one point. So, and this was before things like Tumblr. So
no, that's fair. I know. Well, so here's a question, right? So you were fascinated by these boys growing up. Was there like a quintessential moment in TV? Was there a character, an episode that you can refer back to that you go, that was that moment?
I don't know if I can point out one. Like growing up and watching Saturday morning cartoons, the Animaniacs had a couple of episodes that dealt with weight gain. One that is burned in my mind was they were doing a parody of Star Trek, and they called it Star Trek. And it had the original cast of Star Trek. So it was James T. Kirk, Scotty, Bones, Chekhov, all them. And they meet Scotty. And so, original cast, so he's thin.
Yeah.
And Yakko and Wacko were like, "You're Scotty? Wow, this is like not what we were expecting." Because, they came from the 90s, and as a tongue-in-cheek show, they were like, "Why isn't he fat?" So I don't remember if it was Yakko or Wacko who handed him a donut and said, "Here, this is going to be really important to your future." And Scotty, being from the, whatever century it was supposed to be, had never had a donut, so he eats it and gets addicted. And he commands the replicator to just keep making more and more donuts. And at one point, he's like lying on the floor with his mouth open while all these donuts are dumping into him. And you see his belly just keeps growing and growing and outgrowing his uniform. Then by the end of the episode, he's huge, chubby Scotty. I mean, he's like so big that he can't reach the controls, and he's just spilling out of his uniform. That's something that's really burned into my mind.
It's funny because I've seen that clip, and I remember, listeners, I'm just going to put it out there. That for me is an instant boner moment. I can think back, I can imagine that clip perfectly, and I can already think after this episode, I might just pull that up and have a bit of a wank to it, because that is such a beautiful piece of cinematic excellence. But, I think that's also really interesting, right? Like, when you think of TV shows that you think of iconic moments, right? And we're not talking about gaining here. We're talking about like just anything, anytime, anywhere. It's like they're a dime a dozen. You think of iconic moments, you go, oh, every show's got them. But you think about it, how many people in the wider world who think about Animaniacs and refer back to it would refer back to those moments? But yet all of us have that shared experience of when we know that episode and moment, we know the exact scene. I can almost see it cinematically playing through in my head. I can almost see the way that his belly bounces and expands and curves past a certain threshold. I can almost see the expression on his face as he's like desperately reaching for another donut, but he's now too big to actually reach it and get to it. It's those moments that really inform how we approach those memories. And I think it's really fascinating that a lot of us have similar ones, but we all think about them differently.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was obviously the Santa Claus, child of the 90s. And you know what? If you know, you know. Because if you've seen the Santa Claus, you know the scene, you know the moment. I'm not even going to talk about it because you are already playing it in your mind. You were already doing that tracking pan shot because he's on the treadmill and he's jogging slowly. You can see those chubby cankles and the calves and the thighs in these tight red cut-off shorty shorts because he's trying to exercise. And then it pans up, and then it labors on the midsection, this belly hanging out of his shirt and over the waistband as it bounce, as jog. And it does, because a tracking shot just keeps going, but it labors. It pauses at the belly for a good 3 to 4 seconds before it keeps going and then zooms out so you can see these luscious, plump tits that he's got. And you can see, well, you can't really see much of his neck and face because he's already starting to grow the beard, but you can see how he's rounded out and how this character's really been developed. It's quite something to watch through. Yeah.
Something that I think is really interesting about the way that film is marketed today, rather than use an image of him already completely made into Santa, rather than use any kind of still from that to place on the cover, they always go back to basically it's Tim Allen with his thin face and he's wearing a union suit. And he's just got
the tilted tree. He maybe has like a bloated waist.
Yeah, he's got the belly, but the rest of him looks like like the transformation is just starting. And in the most recent advertisement I've seen for that film, it's basically him lying on the floor with his head propped up on one elbow with his belly spilling out. It's not like actually bursting out or anything, but it's sort of spilling out onto the floor, and it's wrapped in Christmas lights. And I'm like, they know what they're doing. Don't tell me that they don't know what they're doing. They know exactly who they are marketing to.
I think about this a lot. Again, child of the 90s, must have watched every cartoon at some point. And, I think, every cartoon had an episode where, like, the character who was, like, a hero with powers, said, oh, I wish I never had powers. And then they go back in time and see what the world was like and they didn't have powers. There's usually an episode near the end of a season where the main character and his best friends, you have a big fight and will they get back together? But then they inevitably do. But, I don't think a lot of shows had a lot of similar themed episodes all throughout beyond that. But one episode that they almost always had was one where everyone, or at least the main character, got randomly fat for either an explainable reason or just not an explainable reason, and then they were just fat for the episode. And then
it was business as usual after that episode.
Which we love, of course, for serial shows like that, where episodes don't take place in a timeline necessarily. They're all just sort of random events that happen. They don't inform one another. Therefore, the random obesity could be a random period of their life. But this happened so many different shows. Everything from Rugrats, the episode theme was them being overfed babies. I'm just trying to think.
Ren and Stimpy did it.
Rocko's
Modern Life did it.
I'm pretty sure Wild Thornberrys had an episode for that.
Garfield and Friends. There was always, because Garfield was a fat cat, so weight was always a theme with him.
Hey Arnold had an episode for that. I mean, just listen. Think of a cartoon, a challenge to the listeners. Think of a cartoon that you loved as a child. Go to the Wikipedia page, the one that lists the episode concepts, look through it, and I guarantee you in the season runs that it's got, there will be at least one episode that focuses on the fact that a character got fat. And if you find one where that didn't happen, please let us know. But I do find it interesting, that we have these shared experiences where it all kind of comes about. We see it and we absorb it at these prepubescent ages. And this is a part of gaining that I think doesn't get talked about enough. Because we're consenting adults, we can have this conversation. We are aroused by gaining. We have sex according to gaining. We masturbate. We sexually pleasure ourselves in a number of different ways because the concept of gaining makes us horny. But there is clearly a platonic or emotional element to gaining that those of us who have had these early on experiences have, because that's why it would have affected us when we were kids. We weren't sexual yet with a lack of puberty. How could we be? So it clearly taps into something deep in the brain. And I don't know, I hope there's someone out there in the gainer community who's thought about this, decided to become a psychologist and wants to do a deep dive. And hey, if you exist and you're listening, let us know. We'd love to do.
I've tried for years to figure out what is it, like in a Freudian way, what is this about? Because even though I think Freud was full of shit for the most part, I have to admit that some of his theories, he's the father of modern psychology. And like, okay, what would Freud say this is about? And I was thinking, okay, is it some sort of pleasure response to like an oral fixation, because he said that if you overeat, you're orally fixated. So is this something that goes even further back before memory? Was it that we didn't get enough oral stimulation when we were a baby? Like, I don't know, bottle fed versus breastfed, or pacifier versus no pacifier. I don't know. I cannot for the life of me figure out where it comes from or why it started. I just know that it is something that has always been there. For as far back as my memories go, it's been there.
Interesting. And it's interesting you say that, talking about these sort of psychological moments, and apologies, I cannot recall who told me this, but a friend of mine who was a car enthusiast once said, as a point of interest, that most modern cars, and when I say modern cars, I mean more like the luxury vehicles that you could purchase for an exuberant amount of money. They are designed to recreate the experience of being in the womb, which I thought was really
I did not know that.
Yeah, he said he'd seen it on an article somewhere. And look, I would like to endeavor to find this article myself, so I will be doing that after this episode. But yeah, he'd said that apparently there's something to be said that a lot of luxury car experiences are designed to recreate the experience of being in the womb. So it's the way that it's meant to make you sit with your back in a certain position and your legs in a certain position. There's a sense of certain pressure, the materials that they use to make the seat, that they want you to sink into it into such a way that it recreates the sense of you backing your body up into the vaginal lining of your mother's womb. There's a lot of interest around this type of stuff, like, do we in our lizard brain actually have some kind of memory, even if we can't visualize it? Do we have some kind of touch memory, some kind of texture memory of what that experience was like? Therefore, that sense of plushiness, that sense of being cuddled. Because I know that when I think of, my partner, and I think of what I enjoy with gaining, I love the sensation of someone who is fat cuddling into me. Oh, it's magical, and this is no shade to slim people, but it just does not compare. The experience and feel of a fatter, softer body cuddling into you is such a comfort, and I find that in my own gaining journey, as I've grown, I find that I will now go to sleep with my hands between my thighs, just playing with my thigh fat, or I will, pass out just on a day if I've got nothing on, if I'm laying in bed just with my hand, sort of tucked away in my underbelly, in the little fold there. And, I'm playing with my arms, even on this call, just touching and feeling it, because it just feels so nice,
Having had it both ways, I can say that, yeah, cuddling up to someone fatter than me and much bigger than me has been wonderful, because there's just so much to touch, there's so much to fall into, there's so much to feel wrapped in. But then being with someone who was, very, very skinny, they wrap themselves around me, like to have them basically wrap themselves around my belly, which is not huge by any means, but it's substantial. That's also been great, because then I get to be their source of comfort, so I've had it both ways and like it both ways.
Definitely. I was actually just thinking, the last time I hugged a female friend, before lockdown and everything went a bit crazy, she's quite a slender person and she's not a hugger, but we'd had this conversation where a lot was going on and we'd sort of talked about it, and she felt a bit better, and I offered her a hug and said, would you like a hug? And she said, do you know what? Yeah. And I went in for the hug, and like I hugged her, and I did not expect her to just squeeze into me as much as she did. It wasn't uncomfortable, but I asked her about it afterwards, and she just said, "You're just," and I could tell she was a bit uncomfortable because she knew that whatever she was going to say was going to say. The fact that you're fat made this a really enjoyable experience. But she was like, "You were just so cuddly and huggable," and I was like, "Thank you. I try." Like, and I do. I try. I put the food away, and it makes me cuddly and huggable. So that's good. But we're talking about the formation of the gaming experience. So we have that moment as a child, something psychological that we just don't know, and hopefully one day we will know, that informs us why we like it. Eventually we hit puberty, and obviously that's where it can get a little bit confusing. So what was your experience? You were saying you loved to, probably didn't get the opportunity to.
No, I did not. I did not get the opportunity to play. I had a crush on one boy in particular who had a very round belly, and it looked very soft. And I really wanted to, God, I wanted this guy so bad. Of course, nothing ever came of it. I mean, I was coming out, or I was realizing that I was a gay man. This was the mid 90s. Not the best time to be out as a gay person. Not nearly as bad as, a couple decades prior, but it was still like basically not okay to be out to anybody.
Yeah.
So I was grappling with not only realizing that I was a gay man, but also realizing that, oh shit, I like fat guys, and everything that I had ever consumed media wise, like the few gay films that I had been able to see and the few gay themed things that went on in the media were, guys that looked like supermodels being attracted to each other, these gorgeous, chiseled, ripped, unattainable men that were always getting together with each other. And I'm like, well, fuck, this is what I'm supposed to be attracted to, I guess, but this is not what I'm attracted to. What do I do now? So yeah, it was an extremely confusing thing to grapple with both of those simultaneously. And then coming out as a teenager, like I officially came out at 16. And I dated, quote unquote, during those years very sparsely because, again, there weren't many out gay men to choose from. But the first boy that I had as a boyfriend, he was very skinny. And the subsequent ones after that were very skinny. It wasn't until I hit my mid to late 20s that I was actually able to have an experience with a chubby person for the first time.
I mean, it's interesting, right? I think this is a good moment for us to really talk about the fact that, as gainers, no matter our participation in the community, whether we are gainers or encouragers, admirers, we're all subject to the fact that overall, the queer community expects us to want to be fit ourselves and expects us to want to be attracted to other fit individuals. This idea that our focus should be on improving our bodies and our physique and therefore our aesthetic and look to achieve and attain better scores, better lays based on the fact that they are more attractive and therefore more viable. Viable for what? I don't know. Maybe viable to get you a cheaper gym membership, maybe viable to put you in touch with someone who's going to give you some steroids. I don't know.
I think it has a lot to do with status too, because some of the stereotypes that have been pushed within the gay community over the years has been, you are defined by not only how you look, but how your partner looks, the man that you're choosing to date. Like, if you are being judged by the gay society as a 10 and they're judging your partner as a 4, they're going to be like, that's immediately going to reduce your own status within the community. People are that shallow, especially in bar culture, which I had way too much exposure to over my life. It was, and it happened to me a lot of the times. With the person that I was with, I felt like the 4 and they were the 10, and I felt like we were being judged as a collective. And yeah, it's just the stereotypes of gay men being, we all have to be chiseled and ripped and stylish and witty and sociable and, just keep ticking off the list of everything that people expect us to be. It's so overwhelming. And then when you couple that with the fact that you are into men who are fatter, who have bellies, who have, maybe they're not as sociable, maybe they're a little bit more awkward, maybe they're a little bit more geeky. It sucks.
it's interesting coming from a small town, Perth, West Australia. The gay scene is so small. You talk about everyone in the world is 7 degrees of separation from each other, but in a place like Perth, it's 1 to 2. Especially in the gay scene. So I found that, I'd never really gone out into bar culture. I dated someone, we had a bad time of it. We broke up. It was whatever. I waited a bit. And then when I started going out, I'd maybe gone on like 2 dates with people. And then like I was in bars for the first time, going up and meeting people, and people would be like, "Oh yeah, you're that James. Yeah, my friend's friend went on a date with you and he said you're a bit weird." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then you find out very quickly that, especially in small towns, you know, the term it's okay. The term sloppy seconds gets thrown around a lot, and then your worth is, somehow you're supposed to go out and sleep with a whole bunch of people because don't be a prude, but also don't be the guy that everyone slept with. Don't be the town bike. Like, there's nowhere to win. It's this insurmountable pressure of a culture that we're a part of, based on the fact that we are what we are, but drives people away because they don't want to have to engage with it. And I often wonder to myself how much of what we do as gainers, how much of what we try to achieve in terms of body positivity, in terms of trying to focus on our own community, is in response to wanting to disengage with this wider gay community that wants us to be thin and wants us to be attracted to thin.
And I remember I talked about sort of gaining as a form of social rebellion against those norms, against what is expected in gay society. And it's like giving it the finger, fuck your body standards, fuck your beauty standards. I don't give a shit. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to have the body that I want to have. And it's I feel like it is flying in the face of all of that. But then again, it is also its own little microcosm. The more time I spend in the community, I feel like, yeah, we kind of are on an island.
But is that on an island that people have cast us off, or we've cast ourselves off?
I think we kind of removed ourselves to that island in a big way.
I agree with that. But then I come back to the point, why have we done that? Do we want to do that because we want to distance ourselves from the queer narrative that says thin is in, fat is bad? Or is it because, we lose ourselves in the obsession of the fetish? You and I were both quite slim when we started gaining, because people love a number. Do you know what you were weighing in at when you first started to?
When I officially decided to throw myself into it, I want to say about 180 pounds.
About 180, okay.
Yeah.
And what are you now?
235.
235, okay.
Yeah.
So you have made excellent efforts in growth.
Yes.
And that deserves to be recognized. I myself was 100 pounds when I started, and I am now just over 200 pounds.
And that's really significant too. That's 100 pounds heavier than when you started.
Double my starting weight. Some people haven't hit that themselves. So I take it all in. I try to take it all in stride. But everyone's journey is different. Like I've been gaining for 7 years. But my metabolism, it's high. My whole family,
mine too.
My whole family, they are people who, my sister thought she was obese at 130 pounds. She was going to the doctor when she was pregnant at 130 pounds, being like, do I need to be concerned about my weight because of how much she gained by being pregnant? That's my personal experience. Everyone's experience is different.
Yeah. Well, like where you were saying, you and I, we started off thin. Not every gainer does start off thin. Some gainers, they are chubby as children, then they're chubby as teenagers. Maybe they lose a little bit of weight around the college years, and then they decide that they want to gain it back or get bigger than they were when they were younger. For me, the interesting thing is that, so I started off really as like a bloater and as a lurker, really, because I used to never show off any pictures of myself. And when I did, it was from bloating because it was temporary. I wasn't ready to throw myself into making this a permanent thing. And slowly but surely, weight started to pile on just from getting older.
Mm.
Like late 20s, from binge drinking on the weekends, I was starting to get a beer gut. And I would post pictures of that, and I would get a lot of attention based on it. And people asking me, "Are you going to keep going with this? Are you going to keep gaining?" And again, I was like, I don't know if I want to throw myself into this solely. Like I don't know if I'm ready for that level of commitment. But I knew that all that time something was missing. Some component was like not there for me because I was never secure with my body. When I was 135 pounds at 21, I was insecure, even though I was like the very stereotypical twink. It was exactly what everybody was looking for at that time. Never felt comfortable. The
Yeah.
years go by, a little bit of weight gets put on, still didn't feel comfortable. And then finally, 30, 34 was when I decided I'm going to just go ahead and do this. Everything just kind of fell into place. All of a sudden, my confidence level was going up. I was feeling more secure in my own skin. I was like, I would look in the mirror and say, you know what, you look good. Because I used to look in the mirror and say, you look like shit. But I don't do that anymore. And I think that it was committing to it that really got me to that place mentally where I'm like, this is who I was supposed to be.
I feel that, there's certainly something to be said, any circumstance, any job, any relationship, people will always say you've got to commit to it if you want to get the best out of it. You get out what you put in, and gaining is no exception. If you are like us and you don't gain weight very easily, then you probably find that you're not going to have a massive amount of growth very quickly. You need to commit to it. You need to be willing to put the effort in to get the goals that you want to meet. And, no matter how much effort that takes, when you meet that goal, reassess. Do you feel good about what had happened, or do you want to change it? It's all you can do. And I think it's also a big part of why gaining is also political. It's perfectly normal for someone to want to gain and become a little muscly. It's perfectly normal for someone to want to diet, but to want to gain fat specifically, is a very, very taboo concept. I think I've told a couple of people in my life in various circumstances, the situation. But, there have been people whose response to that is to go, you're a freak. There's something mentally wrong with you. Why would you do that? Go and get help.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you realize what you're doing is unhealthy? And while in the back of my mind, I think to myself, that must come from a place of positivity. I don't actually know that it does. Because in my mind, what I hear is shock. I hear and sense the shock. They've gone, what you've just told me is so against everything that I could possibly believe in the world that I just have to throw everything that I can at you to possibly to make this make sense to me. Like the concept is, if I tell him, don't you know that it's unhealthy, he's going to turn around and go, oh no, you're right, actually I might have to rethink that, and then they'll be okay, because they'll go, well, yes, obviously, yes, that's the point I was making. I thought you said that wrong, and yes, now we're back on the level. Fat is bad and everything's okay, but it's not.
I think it kind of depends. So like if it's a family member who's saying that to you, it may genuinely come from a place of love, because family wants you to be around. You know, if a family member thinks that you're doing something that can cut your life short, they're going to feel obligated to say something. And I don't really judge that as like necessarily being toxic. I think they have a good intention. They just didn't execute it well. Now, if that's coming from someone who's supposedly a friend of yours, that's not being supportive. I mean, that's just them pushing their agenda on you. And in my personal experience with my ex-husband, when I told him about all of this, and I kept it from him for quite a long time. We were together 12 years in total, and I think it was by the 8th year that I actually told him about all of this. He reacted very poorly. He did the entire, like, you're a freak, you're weird, I don't understand this, this is disgusting, how could anyone be attracted to this? How could you want to be like that? He really berated me and belittled me for it. Now that is definitely toxic behavior.
Yeah. And as I say, the example I gave is more so like when you're talking to someone and you explain it and they go, ugh. There is a big difference. And I think you can determine intention there.
Yeah.
Like there are people who will say to you genuinely, like they just want to make sure that you're okay. But also from that experience, the people that I have told and are okay with it, when they ask and they just say, I just want to make sure you're okay, you're like, yeah, I'm just being sensible with it all day. Then they go, oh, Okay,
Mm,
shine on. Like, I want to address this, right? Because I think a lot of people have this concern when they start gaining. I know I had this concern, and I think a lot of people do. It's this fear of what are people going to think? Because something in our mind tells us, yes, we're going to get fat. Everyone gets fat. It's very natural to happen. It is. It happens
mm,
when people aren't focusing on their diet. They will naturally put on weight. It happens to a lot of people naturally over a course of years. But somehow in our mind, we've convinced ourselves that because we're doing it intentionally, people are going to find out our dirty little secret, I say in inverted commas, and
mm.
that we're going to get found out and exposed for who and what we are. And I just want to put it out there to people, the people who matter don't care.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that you're okay. Like, if you're the kind of person who's approaching gaining from the perspective of, I am going to drink oil, then sure, you're probably not going to be doing the best health wise. And if people catch you drinking oil, they will probably have some reasonable questions about that. But
Yes, and don't drink oil ever. It's so bad for you. Like you can add oil to things, but if you sit there and you open a bottle of canola oil and start chugging it, you're gonna get really sick.
yeah, I can't imagine that going down well just at all.
No.
But, here's a good example. In my previous job, would often bulk make certain foods. Let's say it's soup, right? Potato and leek soup. I
Mhm.
I edited my mother's recipe heavily by swapping out, a splash of milk for double cream. Like adds a frick ton of calories. It's very calorie heavy, but my God, is it delicious? And I think a few people would have a sample of it and they go, "Oh my gosh, that's so many calories, but it tastes so good." Because it does, and it does. It tastes fantastic. I will happily submit the recipe to anyone who would like to have a copy of it. But, you know, people aren't that negative to things if things can be good, Like,
Mhm.
it's
Well,
just,
I feel like because of the social political ramifications of getting fat on purpose, we all kind of get into this headspace where we suffer from a bit of an invisible audience, and we think that somehow people are going to be like looking at us, just waiting for it to happen. Like the minute we walk out the door, everyone's going to point and go, "Look, fatty, 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 he's getting fat," that kind of thing.
because we've
But
all seen TV shows. We've all
yeah,
seen
exactly.
movies where this is how fat people are treated. This comes to an important point, and we'll probably address this more when we talk about being fat in movies and being fat in Hollywood. But, this is why representation matters, and this is why stories matter. Because if the only stories we tell about fat people are about, you know, Big Bertha who's got an eating problem and she goes, "Oh God, I just can't stop." Like it doesn't paint us in a good light. It doesn't paint
Yeah,
us
no,
with
not at all.
authority or choice. It doesn't paint us with power. Apparently, we're powerless to stop ourselves from eating ourselves to death. In fact, just going to put it out there, there's a movie coming out called The Whale, starring Brendan Fraser. Uh, we're going to want to talk about that when the film comes
Yeah,
out.
yeah, definitely.
So, here's my question for you. We're talking about the
Mhm.
formation of the gaming experience, and clearly, sort of what we sort of led through now is we're up to the point in our own journeys where we're in the throes of the gaming experience. What was the moment for you? You touched on this a little bit, but what was the moment for you where you decided, I'm going to do this?
I think it was that I was, I'm getting older. I was entering my mid 30s. I was looking at the state of my life. I was trying to think of, what's been missing this whole time. I was freshly out of a toxic relationship, and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I've known about this forever, and I've wanted it forever, and I was like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna throw myself into this with abandon, and I'm not gonna. I got to a point where I was like, I just don't give a fuck what people think anymore. I don't care. I don't give a shit if you like it or if you don't like it. And I kind of came up with this mantra: if you don't want to fuck me, then don't fuck me. I don't care. If
It's
you don't want to fuck me, you don't want to fuck me. Somebody else is going to want to fuck me. So
100%. I think it was you that taught me the phrase, like, don't yuck someone's yum.
yes.
And that's straight up truth. It does not matter what features on your body, whether we're talking about weight gain or it's the quality of your skin, the shape of your nose, the size of your limbs. I can personally guarantee there is someone out there that is eyeing that up and down, licking their lips and begging for the opportunity to jump at that. Because something's out there for everybody.
And beauty is subjective. It's subjective. It is what, everyone's got a different definition of it. Everyone finds different things that they find beautiful about someone else. And I had let myself go down the rabbit hole of gay bar culture and what that meant, and how you had to be beautiful, you had to look a certain way, you had to dress a certain way, you had to drink certain drinks. Like, that's how involved it was. And, and then I had all this PTSD left over from my ex-husband about how it was disgusting and gross and yada yada. I'm like, no more. I'm done with it. I don't care. I'm not making excuses. I'm not explaining myself. Like, I love the quote from Mary Poppins where she says, "Let me get one thing clear. I never explain anything." And I'm like, yes, that's what I need to adopt. I don't explain. It just is what it is.
For the young kids who love a bit of RuPaul, she said countless times, if they're not paying your bills, pay them bitches no mind. And, actually, season 6 of Drag Race, Darian Lake had a number of excellent quotes. And here is one from her where she says, the lion does not lose sleep over the opinions of sheep.
Yep.
You have to position yourself as truly the baddest bitch and just go out into the world. And listen, here's again another little bit of advice, because as you say, if you don't want to fuck me, that's fine. Other people will want to fuck me. Like, I'm of an age now at 28, and I wish I'd reached this point in my life earlier, where I just have to acknowledge I don't like most people. Listen, the joke about, like, if someone had a button, they just blow up the world just to see it burn. Like, hello, me today.
You're a Scorpio, right?
First of all, how dare you? But yes, I am a Scorpio.
I thought so. That's a very Scorpio way of looking at things.
Oh, God. Listen, viewers, you didn't see this, but Tim just reached through the screen, snatched my wig. I am scalped. I am bald. I am naked to the eye. I am vulnerable.
It's okay, because the whole "if you don't want to fuck me, don't fuck me" thing, that's a very Cancer way of looking at the world.
The viewpoint I just have now is I just don't care about most people. And again, people can take that how they want to, but when I pause and I think, right, like if I open up an app, let's say I open up Grindr and I'm scrolling through Grindr, and every single one of those could be Gus Kenworthy, Zac Efron, it could be Tom Hardy, it could be everyone. It could be every A-lister that I think is gorgeous, right? But I'm still going to look at that list at this point in my life and go, do I have enough energy, time, charisma to fuck you? Probably not. Like, I'm in my pajamas. I've already had my cup of tea. I'm probably watching WandaVision at this point. Like, I'm just like, I've already planned to have a wank. And when I think about it, right, like, I've been touching my dick my entire life. I know what feels good to me. I know what gets my dick off. I think back to the amount of times I've had sex with people, and the sex was so bad that I laid there getting fucked thinking I'd rather be wanking right now, because that would be more enjoyable than this. Like, you eventually reach a point where you're like, I don't have time. I don't have time for subpar sex. I don't have time for people that I do not give a fucking shit about. Truly fed up 100%. And that is a position that you're going to get into, yes, about sex, but also about gaining. You're going to reach a point where you go, I don't give a flying fuck. Like, I've told some experiences on lives in the past, and I'll probably tell them a bit more on the podcast. I've had some negative experiences with the family trying to actively interfere with my weight gain for a number of different reasons. That was very difficult to deal with at the time. But I now live in a different country. I'm living my life more authentically to myself, and I don't care about it anymore. I look at it and I go, no, they can't do anything. And if I moved back to my hometown and tried to do things and they tried to interfere, I'd damn well tell them to fuck off. And maybe that's age. Maybe that's emotional maturity. Maybe that's experience that allows me the freedom to think and feel that way and know that confidently within myself. But this is putting it out there to new gainers and people who maybe aren't certain at whatever stage they are on the gaining journey. Loving yourself enough to do it for yourself is key. But also deciding that the words, thoughts, and opinions of other people do not matter is also very, very important.
It's so key to your mental health over the whole thing. You know, I remember when I was still with my ex-husband and I was in that in-between place where I wasn't quite chubby yet, but I was, I wasn't a twink either. Some of his friends, who also were horrible people, would comment on he always he looks like the evil chubby boy that's always standing next to you, because I always had like a resting bitch face thing going on. And
evil chubby boy, what is that?
Yeah. And I took at the time I took offense, because I was like, well, shit, if this is what the people around him are saying to him, what must he think of me? And, this must be why he doesn't want to have sex with me, or why he's not even showing me any kind of affection. Because at one point he had me so screwed up, I was choking down diet pills.
Oh my
God. Yeah, that's all over with now. But like now, if someone like the boyfriend, he calls me chubby, and it's heartwarming, it's endearing. Like, I feel good when he says that. It's no longer a slander to me. And if someone were to say it, like, say if I were to go out to a bar now, even though it's still kind of dicey with COVID, and someone that I knew from years ago mentions, "Oh, you've put on some weight," I feel like my first response is going to be, "Yeah, doesn't it look great? Don't I look great?"
God, the last job I had, the elevators in this building, right? Like, you would get in and they had a mirror right across from you. So depending on like whether it was the start of the day or the end of the day, like, you just look at your reflection and go, especially at the end of the day, I'd look at myself and go, it's been a day. Let's just go the fuck home. But there was one day, I felt really fresh after work because we were going to go to some kind of dinner. And one of the company directors actually was in the lift with me, and there was some sort of general chatter going on, but I was looking at my reflection, and I'm a funny cunt. I will say stupid shit. So I paused and I said to the group, like, guys, can I just ask a question? And they were all like, what, James? What? And I was like, do you ever look in the mirror and think about how gorgeous I am? Just and listen, they laughed. They thought it was very, very funny. But I'm sitting there just like Alyssa Edwards style, like looking in the mirror, just like, oh my God, oh my God, I'm so gorgeous. Just, model. Willie Ninja has nothing on this. Honestly, call Vogue, tell them whoever you got for the front, bin them, cancel, delete it, fat. This is the bitch you want on the front because she looks so good. And I never had those moments of confidence in my life previously. This has all come about because of gaining. So something that we need to really focus here on, and we want to put out there to people, is gaining isn't just about sexual gratification. Going back to our childhood, there is something about comfort. Looking into our adulthood, there is something about confidence. Looking into culture, there is something about political, and there is something about self-love and self-worth. It affects every area of your life. It is a lifestyle choice, but lifestyle doesn't just mean food, getting fatter. It means looking after your health. Because of gaining, and because I know that it can affect my health, I didn't give a shit about my health beforehand. I wasn't seeing the doctor. I now make sure I go to the GP at least twice a year for general checkups, because I wasn't looking at that shit before. So I'm actually doing better with my health now than I was before I started. I'm looking at my diet. I'm looking at my activities. I'm looking at everything. Creating and what's the word? Cultivating. It's like, I'm thinking of an art term. Couture, no. Cultivating, I am. Profiling, I am.
I don't know.
I'll just say cultivating. I am curating.
Curating. Gotcha.
That's the word. I knew I had a word. I am curating the life that I want, the body that I want, and the lifestyle that I want based on what I'm after. And I've reached a point in my life where I'm just going to pursue that now, and nothing's going to stop me.
Same here.
Do you know, that felt really good to talk about?
Yes, it does. It's very liberating to be able to talk about it. And another thing that I really loved as I went on this journey was meeting people in person and speaking about it openly, and being able to go to a restaurant and sit down and talk about it openly, or being out in a coffee shop and talk about it, and then I guess it all culminated in being able to do it in front of a group of people, of strangers, at this leather event that I go to. A feeder friend of mine and I ran a seminar on gaining and encouraging. And I got to talk to a whole group of strangers with my belly hanging out, because I was just wearing a pair of shorts and boots, and I had on like a leather vest that was open. So I'm letting it all hang out. I'm exposing myself totally to people that I don't know. And when I say expose, it's so funny because as chubby men or as gainers, we never feel more say like if just like your junk was hanging out but you had a shirt on, you would actually feel less exposed than if it was the other way around. Like when your gut's exposed, you feel really exposed to the rest of the world because that's what they're going to be focusing on. And there I was in all of my glory, and I actually got funnel fed in front of strangers. So like that was an extremely liberating experience for me.
Not gonna lie, that sounds pretty feckin' hot. And if there's a video, I will pay. I
really wish I had thought to tell someone. There's one picture that exists, and it's on my Instagram profile.
So that's probably another point to make. We operate on Grommr. I personally operate on Instagram, as does Tim as well. YouTube. You're listening to this through either Patreon or through Anchor. To listen to it on different podcasting networks. We're having this discussion on multiple platforms. We're having this with access to a number of different people. I mentioned about how good this feels to be able to talk to Tim about it and to be able to share this with all of you. If you have people that you can talk to about this, especially people who are like-minded and can share that experience, talk to them about it, because this is phenomenal. This feels incredible. If you can make friends near where you live that you can associate with and have a good time with, it doesn't have to be about sex, but I promise you, just having someone that you can sit down with for a coffee or for a meal and just talk is a great first step.
It'll do wonders for you. You'll be amazed at how relieved you'll feel. I remember how relieved I felt for years and years and years of feeling like it was a dirty little secret that I had to keep.
I think that's just about the end of our episode today. Tim, do you have any closing remarks or thoughts?
No, just like to piggyback on what you said, if you are experiencing these things, if you're just starting out in gaining, or you have an interest in it, you're not really sure where it's going yet, or if you're a seasoned gainer, reach out to people and have those conversations and talk about the things that you're interested in, not just within the fetish, but in life in general. Make friends. You'll have wonderful experiences that you can draw on for the rest of your life if you do that.
100%. And, you can talk to other people and you can also talk to us. So look, you can find me on Grommr and Instagram at stannnum, and Twitter and YouTube at stannnumg.
And you can find me on Grommr as Orpheus. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter as Thicc Mouse. And of course, you can find more of what we've talked about today on Instagram at Thicc Radio and on Patreon at Thicc Radio.
But that's about it for this week. So thank you all for joining us. And until next time, bye.
Bye. Bye.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stan and Thicc Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitsu.
Our theme song is provided by BlueSky.